Namaskaram. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. This is Sri Iyer, your host, and I am with Sridhar Chityalaji. Sridharji, welcome to episode number 123. Today is the 22nd of March 2021, sir.
Namaskaram, good morning. And, we have had a wonderful, very eventful weekend, and I'm sure that we're going to have an excellent week coming up as well.
Yes, and we have a lot of news to share with you viewers. So we'll start off with the main points. In United States news, Biden stumbles and falls climbing stairs to Air Force One. Amid border surge, confusion prevails over Biden policies. Republicans call for hearing on how border crisis may threaten national security and safety of Americans. Former ICE chief says whole nation is a sanctuary for illegal immigrants. Trump is returning to social media with his own platform, and Republicans vote to lift Caucus ban on earmarks following Democratic Party revival. So a lot of stuff happening, sir. What are your thoughts?
I think my thoughts are there are three specific items which have dominated the headlines over the weekend. And the first and foremost is the developing border crisis. As yesterday, Sunday, there was a developing story and headlines from Fox. The border situation has reached such a precipitous crisis that they're not going to hold anyone in the border, allowing them almost like straight through passage into the country. And in the prior years, at least they used to be detained, retained, and have a documentation of notification of arrival or reporting in a specific court. Now they are saying, we just don't have the time, don't have the resources, everything, it's an open border. And there has been decriminalization of the border crossings. So let people go through. Even COVID tests have stopped. And so these people are coming into the country. And there's very mixed news. DHS, Department of Homeland Secretary, Homeland Security Secretary, or Department of Homeland Secretary, has given a news has given a press statement, which is to say borders are closed. Doesn't seem to be the case. When you hear from the border states, the southern states, especially Arizona and Texas. The second story that is coming through as a result of that is many of them are not COVID tested, and many people, there's a number that ranges from 10 to 25 to 30%, of the people entering the border states, without COVID tests. The third that is also as a result is that you can see that you read out in the headlines, the ICE, Immigration Control Enforcement head, saying that this is now a national security issue with people across the country. Trump had tweeted, which is to say not tweeted, had reported that, there's close to, according to his reports, close to people from more than 100 countries, not just purely the three Central Asian or Central American republics making the crossing. So I think this particular issue is of great concern, which is the most dominating headline as far as the weekend is concerned. I think the second thing that is also causing a little bit of a concern for people is that we are now taking up both, in Georgia, we saw that in Michigan, we have seen. And now we are hearing that Arizona is going to take up manual recount of 2.1 million ballots. Now, did the Supreme Court decide to take a complete pause and allow this chain of events to continue rather than resolving at that point of time? We also had the unfortunate, January 6th Capitol Hill riots, which probably prevented any kind of an impasse for a period of 5 days or 6 days, which Jim Jordan was alluding to or would have presented, but that never happened. Now we have Arizona Senate, doing the recount. What happens if the recount says that it is, the process there was violation? I'm not suggesting it's the case, but the fact that it is being taken up again is a cause for concern in terms of, without any reforms, whether there is going to be a process. that is going to continue. Now, the third thing is Nancy Pelosi is going, gangbusters are going ahead with the electoral reform process, which is to bring everything to the center in terms of conducting the elections to the process for voter ID, voter registrations. It's called as the HR1 Act, undermining the states such as what Arizona, Texas, and some of the other states are doing. So these are three kind of main dominating from a domestic US issues point of view.
Sir, let me ask you a question. Why is it not better for the center to try and take over control, sir? Because then it will be a uniform process across the country, isn't it?
See, I think that the conduct of there are unique nuances that varies from state to state in terms of how the electoral process is managed and conducted. That ranges from technology, that ranges from, for example, if you take California, they have a huge army bases, especially San Diego and so on. Something similar in Nevada. So those states may require a slightly different mechanism in terms of early to late. And that doesn't need to apply to all of the states. This has been the state's case, and some of the states have saying that they have a unique nuances as to why they need to have a specific voter ID. And some states feel that the voter ID is not warranted anybody who is living in the state. So now let us say you bring it to the center and impose a consistent kind of set of norms. Let us say only 50% of the people, which is adequate, or 50.5% of the people vote for it, and 49.5% of the people reject it. So how does it then bring about a kind of a minimum criteria that constitutes the basis for the conduct of the elections by the states? Because if it is asymmetrically skewed towards one way, then you find that a vast set of constituents are not taken into account in terms of their views. This has been the constant contention that a simple majority rule to pass, if you say 66% or 70% of the people have to pass, given the importance that this has on the constitutional relevancy of an election, then I would say agree. But if it is going to be without this simple filibuster rule, which is likely to be eliminated, or you need to establish a minimum kind of criteria, then I think it would make sense, as you rightly point out, to a central scheme which is accepted by all states. Or you come up with a central scheme, you send it to each of the states and get each of the states to buy into that. Then you have a two-step process to introduce a centralized scheme where input is taken from all the different states and various constituents, and then there is a mechanism that is consistent across the nation. I would probably tend to agree with that rather than a simple central imposition.
And White House shuts down Putin invitation to live video chat with Biden after the sparring. And in US-China, South China Sea news, US-China clashed publicly in the first meeting under Biden as the gloves come off. What are your thoughts on that meeting, sir?
I think it is an unmitigated disaster for United States. And I don't know why they held this meeting in Alaska and why this had to be a public meeting and why there had to be, a press brief independent. Apparently, this 5 minutes or 7 minutes time slot that was given to China. China decided not to follow that rule and, went on a complete blast. It became an embarrassment. Both parties have walked away with what I call, the suboptimal outcome, and the intent never achieved the objective. There was no rush for this meeting, especially when Blinken and Austin attended meetings in Japan, attended meetings in Korea. Then Austin went to India, and Blinken came back to Alaska, and Jake Sullivan joined him in that specific meeting. And China called it as 2 + 2 to add insult to the injury. 2 plus 2 is usually the Secretary of State and Defense. There was no defense. There was National Security Advisor. So they called it as 2 plus 2. They let go of the barrage on what all US has done. So US has no right to dictate what China does. Basically, I think China is very apprehensive that it is getting increasingly isolated in the world, and they let out their full steam. I don't think China is going to have too many friends, after this. But the story is that did China ever have lots of friends at any given point? They use money and other kinds of mechanisms, to make their influence felt. So I think that this was unwarranted. I think Mike Pompeo and even Trump tweeted. Mike Pompeo tweeted. Trump mentioned this meeting should not have been in Alaska and they should not have been in person, and they should have been very specific format agreed to between the two. So the net result is they have come out worse than where they started. And one thing, if you have to say from a policy continuity point of view, both Biden and Trump are following a consistent policy, which is putting the rhetoric and pressure on China.
And GOP senators push stripping China's preferred trade status to protect US workers. That's a big news.
It's a big news. They want the subsidies, and they want the agro economy to be protected and preserved. They want the manufacturing industry to be protected. They want the rare earths and semiconductor and electronic industry to be protected. They want some of the more strategic technologies such as 5G and AI, etc., to be outside the purview of what is developed in the United States. I think the GOP also wants to make sure that many of the technologies that are imported from United States doesn't fall into the hands of the Chinese PLA. So I think that is going to be back on the table when the discussions if they ever have discussion or a debate in the Senate.
Sir, intelligence officials believe China meddled in the 2020 elections to dislodge Trump. The question, sir, is it beyond John Ratcliffe? Somebody else is now weighing in?
No, it is this set of people within the intelligence community. The names have not been released, but the declassified report, which we can actually share on the PGurus site, the declassified, to the extent of what is available in the declassified report, states that it is not overwhelming majority which went with John Ratcliffe, but certainly some members of the intelligence community concur with the outcome that there was interference from China.
Stop Asian Hate has relevance everywhere, even in Asia. Can you please expand, sir?
Well, what's happening is that many of the people who are frustrated around the world are venting their anger. For example, if you take Myanmar. In Myanmar, many of the companies and many of the factories that were destroyed were Chinese, during this revolution or during this junta takeover of the nation. That's an example, which is namely to say the targeting of some of this, Asian or Chinese. They didn't want to say Chinese, the Asian or East Asian people is as a direct result of the fallout from the COVID. That people have seen that to some extent in other ASEAN countries as well.
The United States and South Korea omit the word denuclearization from joint statement. Does that mean that South Korea might nuclearize itself?
I think that simply implies that the right of deterrence lies with both nations. That's all it simply means. We don't want to have one country going one way and without any kind of unfiltered checks on the North Korea.
This is an interesting news. Chinese military has banned Tesla cars in its complexes. What gives, sir?
Well, I think that it is very similar to Huawei communication. I mean, what's the best definition of Tesla cars? The Tesla cars are called as computers on wheels. So they believe that, there's a fair amount of data that is collected from the ecosystem that is stored in a central database, of Tesla. So which is accessible because that is within the prerogative of the US law enforcement. So they believe that the data is available. So the So they're saying if you're going to apply to my 5G Huawei technology, well, I think we would like to apply the same. And of course, Elon Musk has come back with a rebuttal, which is that it's all nonsense. We don't do any of those things. But then, of course, will the Chinese listen?
And in Myanmar coup, Malaysian PM backs the proposal for an ASEAN summit. Is Malaysia part of ASEAN?
Yes, they're one of the important members. They're actually first five founder members. It was originally Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia, six Brunei, Singapore, and Malaysia. Then subsequently, the other nations got added, such as Vietnam, Guam, Cambodia, and so on.
And Jokowi also calls for a meeting of ASEAN leaders for on the Myanmar crisis. And Malaysia gives 48 hours to North Korea for its staff to leave. What happened there, sir?
Well, I think this is a fallout that is going on between the two nations, and effectively, Malaysia has said, you cannot use our soil for any of your illegal and espionage and other types of activities, and you cannot be a threat to the state of Malaysia, and so therefore they have given a notification for them to leave.
And in India news, United States Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin meets Indian leadership, focus on expansion of strategic ties. 3-day visit achieved expanding bilateral defense and security ties emerging from China threat. And this is notwithstanding the media barrage in China, Pakistan, and Russia against India.
Well, I think in the new definition, which we will probably cover in a very special show on the status of Quad and where we are heading. I think in this special show, the United States has declassified or reclassified the construct of the Quad into two groups. They call as those who are allies and those who are strategic partners. The allies are Korea, Japan, Australia, even Britain for that matter. They are allies with whom United States has much deeper alignment in terms of strategic partnership. Whereas they classify India as a partner. India is not an ally because India has preserved its autonomy in terms of the choice. So therefore, they call them as a partner. So when you look at the statement that is coming out, in a technical term, it has become 1+1 rather than 2+2. Historical 2+2 relegated to 1+1. But the good news is Austin met with Prime Minister, met with Dowell, met with Rajnath Singh ji, and then they expanded a number of areas where they want to have more drones to be bought, integrated 29 MHQ drones. They want to have more helicopters and more defense expansion. That's one thing. The second is they also want to have what Austin calls as bifurcated and allocated roles for managing the Indo-Pacific and South China Sea. So they're moving towards, without saying Quad is being reshaped, they're saying that, it is moving to a different kind of an architecture. What responsibility India will have, we don't know. In the Quad architecture, India is supposed to be one of the leaders of the Quad partnership in the strategic objectives that Quad was defined to be by Shinzo Abe. Shinzo is behind Quad. Shinzo Abe. Even for the Quad meeting, Prime Minister Modi was quite reluctant, and he was persuaded by Scott Morrison and Mr. Suga to attend the inaugural, and which he did, meeting once the agenda was kind of defined. So I think that the objectives seem to have been accomplished. There was some media news, which is to say that Mr. Menendez, one of the senators from United States, had written that sanctions would apply if S-400 was imported from Russia. That issue was to be brought up. Whether it figured in the discussion, we don't know. But the fact is that I think India is well prepared to deal with it because they've dealt with it for quite a few times as to why S-400. So I think the discussion seems to have gone in the right direction. but we could see recalibrated outcomes emerging out of it.
According to Reuters, I believe it did. So we don't know. We'll have to wait and see how it goes, sir. And in United States, India Artificial Intelligence Initiative launched to boost bilateral cooperation. Now, combine this with the fact that Israel is also going to work with India in its drone technology. That's a significant step to try and help India to have state of the art drone technology, isn't it?
It is. It is. Look, I think this is what I have also been talking about, that India's intent and strategy to be strategic flexibility in terms of the choice of partners working with India in various programs as part of either PLI schemes or part of the domestic programs that has been launched by Prime Minister Modi, is giving it the flexibility to shape the direction as is required or as is deemed from an Indian vantage point. So it no longer is a static, fixed relationship. That means my partner is only Russia and I'll only work with Russia. So Israel clearly has emerged as one of the strategic partners. Japan, needless to say, has been the long-term strategic partner for India. In the recent past, we have also seen Taiwan emerge as one of the partners. Of course, Korea has also been an independent strategic kind of a partner to India with a vast amount of investment in the country. So Israel is the latest country to join. Until Trump, I would assume that it's going to continue. We have seen major defense expansion, potentially 5G and AI, because there's an AI US partnership that's also announced. You find that United States is another partner that is very, very strategic. We have seen that in the avionics with the partnership with the French. So India is using the right set of partners, a combination of investment, technology, localization of the production. The emergence of Israel in this specific drone is very significant.
And Made in India LCU, Landing Craft Utility, has been commissioned into the Indian Navy at Port Blair. It can carry battle tanks and trucks.
It is. It's very interesting because the reason is, if you recall, Port Blair is one of the important kind of strategic vantage points for Indian Navy to apply the blockage in the Malacca Straits. So it requires both capabilities on land and sea. Of course, it already has the capability in air by virtue of the carriers. So the story is that this addition, indigenized, locally produced, is one more feather in the cap of India, and it basically is building fortress type capabilities to manage its defense and offense needs in the waters of Indian Ocean.
And India and UK to sign a joint trade agreement during Boris Johnson's visit. So this visit finally is happening. It was to have happened during Republic Day. So let's hope that things start taking an uptick from here.
Indeed, I think that if you can again look at it from a UK point of view, United Kingdom has formed a strategic partnership with ASEAN, which is its traditional, so which ASEAN welcomed. In fact, Singapore welcomed it wholeheartedly. Japan, it has formed a partnership with Japan. It has a partnership with Australia. Now it is coming to India, which is historical. UK is one of the important partners of India. So they are establishing a partnership with India as well. So which augurs well. So they're not tied to the EU scenario anymore. Boris Johnson is on his way to say how to rekindle and rebuild the UK economy with all its vintage heritage, the empire partners.
And in Europe news, Ukraine to return ownership of jet engine maker from Chinese investors. So is it like wresting it back?
Yeah, it is basically they're saying that we do not want Chinese investment.
EU countries
Resting it back.
resume.
Resting it back. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. EU countries resume using Astra Zeneca vaccine. The lockdown extensions loom in Germany as instances increase. So is Belgium and Paris Netherlands, everywhere in Europe, we are seeing COVID cases going up. In fact, Romania has record patients in ICU in one day. What is this sudden surge? What is the reason for this, sir?
Variants, the variants. There are various variants now coming in. We have a Brazil variant here. We have a UK variant here. We have a African variant now. So we have quite a few variants coming into the mainstream. I mean, as is the case, nobody is able to determine how these things are happening. But it's the rise in variants, and it is the next wave as people try to relax. And remember, EU is a confluence of free flow of people. Whenever they have mild attempt to lift the sanctions, you have people moving from one place to another, being very densely populated and densely located.
So, in markets, the G7 suggests boosting IMF reserves to help vulnerable nations, first time since 2009.
In other words, they want to create a reserve. Those countries which cannot print money, those nations which don't have the ability to borrow by virtue of weak balance sheets, they cannot be left to fend for themselves. So IMF or World Bank, especially IMF, in these circumstances comes to rescue. This being a pandemic, they are asking and reaching out to the nations to create a reserve so some of the weaker nations can be funded to manage their balance sheets.
And Dow fell more than 200 points as there was a bank sell-off, breaking the 2 weeks winning streak. Now the rate fears are being highlighted for the blame, and it looks like the bond market is basically dictating what the stock market ought to be doing. Your thoughts, sir?
That's exactly it. The bond markets are not buying in to the theory that there is the inflation is containable, and the rates can be kept to the levels they are. So clearly, I think this excess stimulus that is getting into the economy is not very welcome. Yesterday, which is Sunday, Lawrence Summers, who is considered in many ways the Azan in the democratic economic policy framework, and who himself has served as a Treasury Secretary, went public by saying that in 40 years, he has never seen a fiscal and monetary policy that's on a collision course, not auguring well for United States. So this shift that we talked about, which is the focus is on not traditional vectors, but more around the labor market as the basis for determining the rate hikes, is causing a lot of hiccup, and the synchronization of both the treasurer as well as the Fed chairman in moving in the same direction, where they are allowing inflation to run high according to the bond markets without adjusting the rates, is not an appropriate acceptance of the market movements.
And Fed's decision not to extend a pandemic era credit exemption on strategic liquidity ratio requirements further hurts, isn't it?
It is. I think that under the pandemic, certain asset classes like treasuries, right, where they were exempted from holding risk capital against it because it's a treasury. But on March 31st, that expires. So, which means even for assets held as treasury, there has to be risk capital provision. What that may see is that you may see the treasury being sold off by the banks. So the banks took a hit as a result of that because it's more capital. The second, I think, which is also is that there is this $120 billion program that is continuing, and there is more stimulus planned. Okay, so when you remove this provision, SLR provision, then you are left with public effectively to buy, or overseas debt holders to buy this new debt that is going to be put into the market. So this is another kind of a gridlock, which is why the bank stocks took a hit.
And crude finished at $61.51, Brent at 64.51, 10-year Treasury at 1.725%, 30-year Treasury at 2.436%, and Bitcoin at $58,427 and 65 cents. Where is Bitcoin headed? Up, down, or sideways?
The Bitcoin, the target is once the economy begins to kind of recalibrate and recover, as in the second half of the year or from the third quarter, by all calculations and predictions, we could be in the 75 to $100,000 kind of a number. Because when the markets kind of go up, you find when the tech stocks begin to take a little bit of a hit as the rates climb, you find Bitcoin speculation moves up. So I feel that the Bitcoin will move. The reason why we say that the second quarter to fourth quarter you will see an uptick, because all of this cash that is now going to get into the system, we just got in, right? Because the $1.9 trillion stimulus just got passed. So that liquidity is going to sit in the system. Besides, there's more coming. And that has to be spent in some way or the other. And so you will begin to see maybe asset inflation or inflation in some of the market prices. That's also reflected in the GDP growth, GDP revised growth that Fed has forecast.
And that's all we have for today. Namaskar, and see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. Namaskaram, Sridharji, and thanks as always.
Namaskar. Have a wonderful day, and we'll look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Thanks for all your support.